Many of you have been along for Ivy's journey since the very beginning, back in the summer of 2024 when I created this little illustration. You joined me through Inktober, where I created the first illustrations for the book and worked through some pretty big doubts on whether or not I could actually be a writer. You've been with me through creating new illustrations for the book and all of the rewrites and, of course, my nemesis, formatting. First of all, thank you to everybody who has stuck with me for this and encouraged me to keep going. It's been a pretty wild ride, and it's very surreal to actually be able to hold the book in my hands. Wild. This really has been a team effort, and I want to share the full book with you guys. So without further ado, grab a snack, grab a snuggle buddy, grab some tea, and let's read this book together. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Ivy. She was not little in years, but little in stature. Ivy stood about 4 inches tall, almost 4 1/4 if she stood on the very tips of her toes. Ivy was a curious girl and a collector of sorts. She was a seeker of special somethings, extraordinary objects of beauty and glamour, of magic and allure. She was determined to curate the most fantastical collection. In fact, she had lovingly built shelves along the walls of her home for just this purpose. She spent her days wandering through the forest in search of special somethings, but the only somethings that caught her eye were considered perfectly ordinary by everybody else. A broken piece of an ordinary snail shell, a shriveled sprig of ordinary lavender, a crumpled piece of old, discarded, ordinary rubbish. Ordinary things unfit for an extraordinary collection. So the days passed by and she let the objects linger, tucked amongst the fallen branches in the grass, all the while secretly believing they were really quite lovely. Even so, she endeavored to search for something more. One day, moments after the first rainfall of autumn, the sun began to peek shyly through the curtain of clouds. Its light filtered softly between the leaves, illuminating a peculiar object on the forest floor. Curiosity outweighing caution, Ivy crept quietly towards it, the moss squishing between her fingertips and her toes. Reaching down, she grasped the ivory cage of a long-departed life, a bird skull weathered by countless seasons. She stared into the hollow sockets, seeing in them an opportunity to view the world through different eyes. "Perhaps this will help me find my special somethings," Ivy whispered. Gently placing the skull over her own, she peered out through the hollows. The rocks and leaves and dewdrops around her seemed just a little bit more beautiful, as if the vessel of this long-forgotten creature heightened the world's magic. As Ivy walked through the forest, she came across the familiar something she passed by every day. But through the eyes of the bird skull, these mundane objects became a little bit more. Was the dull blue of this chipped button a bit more vibrant today? Was the capped acorn a bit more charming? Was the tattered leaf a richer green? Perhaps these old familiar somethings could be special after all. So she gathered them up and brought them back to her secret sanctum, a little chamber hidden underneath an old piece of tin. She scampered down the ladder, confident that her special somethings would be safe here. The den was quite cozy, not too big and not too small. She gazed up at her special shelves. They were long and inviting, eagerly awaiting the opportunity to hold special somethings. Ivy was more than willing to oblige. Gently, she placed each new item on the shelves and admired her handiwork. But the shelves stared back at her, the need for adornment echoing in the empty spaces. So Ivy left her den to continue her search through the forest. The thing about forests is that they're often overgrown with weeds, and when you're only 4 inches tall, those weeds can be quite a hassle to trudge through. But Ivy was determined that nothing would keep her from seeking her special somethings. So she plowed through the curly dock, the nettle, and the dandelions, their leaves tickling her cheeks. Emerging from the weeds, Ivy spotted a young oak tree. She climbed up into its branches, hoping for a better vantage point for spotting special somethings. The autumn wind was crisp this morning, giving her goosebumps and causing the bird skull to wobble on her head. Ignoring the chill, she peered out through the hollows to the forest around her, waiting for a something to catch her eye. In a tree across from her own, the sun cast its rays upon a sturdy pine cone, one she'd admired many times before. But this particular pine cone looked bigger than it had yesterday, and were its scales a warmer brown too? "Perhaps it's a special something after all," she whispered. Eager to get a closer look, she climbed down from her tree and began her trek across the way. The journey was no small distance, and it left her weary and breathless. But as she neared the tree, she discovered a new and treacherous obstacle waiting for her, a miniature forest of thistles. She gazed up at the pine cone, still sunlit on its branch, and determined that her prize was worth it. Ivy ran through the thistles, their prickles tearing at her skin and sleeves. With every scratch and scrape she endured, she held on to the particular pine cone with her mind. Disheveled, she reached the trunk of the tree and scampered up the branches. There it was, the particular pine cone. As she pulled it from the branch, a few of its scales fell softly beside her feet. She glanced down to the thistles below, knowing she would have to brave their prickles again. Her eyes swept over the fallen scales, and an idea knitted itself together. She scooped up the scales, snatched a few pine needles from the tree, and fastened them to her shoulders. Ivy dropped the pine cone to the ground and slid down the tree trunk close behind it. As she waltzed back through the forest of thistles with her new special something, the prickles bounced harmlessly over her pine cone epaulets. Ivy brought the pine cone back to her den, tucking it neatly beside the chipped blue button. It truly was the finest pine cone she'd ever seen, and most definitely more magical than it had been the day before. Though the special shelves were far from full, she was exhausted from her journey and the sun was beginning to set. So she climbed into bed and quickly fell asleep, dreaming of all the special somethings the bird school could show her. Morning arrived with the softest autumn sun and a gentle tapping on Ivy's metal roof. Quiet, constant, and gentle. She quickly jumped out of bed and clambered up the ladder to peek outside. Not more than a few steps away was a woolly worm, quietly wandering his way through the forest, unaware that he'd walked right across Ivy's rooftop. She had seen many woolly worms in her lifetime, but this one was truly magnificent. His coat glittered in the loveliest copper and ebony as he ambled on, unhurried. Searching for special somethings was truly a joy, but Ivy knew that a joy shared is a joy doubled, so an idea formed in her mind. She set off across the roof, bird skull wibbling and wobbling on her head. She hollered a good morning to the woolly worm and asked to join in upon his journey. With a tilt of his head, a warm smile, and a yes, I would enjoy the company, they set out, beginning their aimless journey through the forest together. They walked and they talked, and Ivy discovered that the woolly worm's name was Bert. Well, Albert for long, but Bert for short. As they walked through the forest, shuffling through moss and dirt and rocks and weeds, Ivy came across more of her old familiar somethings. The mottled arrowhead that pointed toward the pond, a minuscule mushroom with its tapered cap, an old set of dragonfly wings. She'd always loved the many shades of gray in the arrowhead, the way the mushroom cap looked like a gnome's hat, and the subtle iridescence of the wings, but never before had they appeared this special. The arrowhead looked sharper, the mushroom looked more whimsical, and the wings looked like they were weaved from opals. So one by one, she scooped them up and continued on. As the pile in her arms grew, Ivy struggled to see where she was going. All of a sudden, she tripped over a knotted root, spilling her items across the ground. I must find a better way to carry my special somethings, Ivy said, brushing the dirt from her knees. She looked out through the hollows of the skull, scanning the forest around her. Ivy spotted a brilliant flash of green hidden in a patch of brambles. She moved closer and discovered a scrap of plaid fabric, tattered around the edges, but still quite lovely. I know, Ivy said. This will make a beautiful backpack to carry my special somethings in. So she freed the fabric from its thorny captors and got to work. Bert assured her that he was happy to wait for a while, as he had nowhere important to be. He carefully watched over her special somethings while Ivy stitched together her satchel. Ta-da! She exclaimed, holding up her new creation. Bert clapped his many hands together and let out a big bravo! As Ivy and Bert continued on, she asked him about his life, where he'd grown up, what his favorite snack was, what were his hopes and dreams. Here and there, anything really, and oh, I'm not sure. I don't know if I have one, were his answers. Nonsense! Everyone has dreams. Mine is to create the loveliest collection of special somethings, she said, patting her stuffed satchel with pride. Bert pondered. I suppose my dream is to become the most beautiful moth in the sky. How do you become a moth? Ivy questioned, imagining herself sporting a lovely pair of wings. I suppose just by being a caterpillar. I'll find my wings one day, Bert replied. They continued on their journey, both quiet and thoughtful for a while. Bert wondered how any of the ordinary items in Ivy's satchel could be considered a special something. And Ivy wondered how Bert would ever become a moth if he spent all his time aimlessly traveling the forest instead of searching for his wings. But neither spoke their thoughts aloud, choosing to trust that the other knew what they were doing. The autumn wind carried with it an array of colorful leaves, as well as pieces of litter from the faraway big places. Big people are often careless with their belongings, and those belongings sometimes find their way into the forest. One such piece floated softly to the forest floor right across Bert and Ivy's path. It nestled itself into the fallen leaves as if it were ready to hibernate for the winter. But through the hollows of the skull, Ivy could see its specialness right away and couldn't let it be lost to the leaves. Carefully brushing them away, she picked up the item, thin and glossy. It was a black and white photograph with big people on it who looked quite a bit like herself. "What a lovely little family! This is special for sure," Ivy said, gently rolling it up to tuck in amongst the other items in her satchel. Bert found that he agreed. A family is a very special something indeed. As Ivy and Bert continued their journey, they heard a distant rumble. Ivy gazed up at the sky, only now noticing the thick, slate-colored clouds that had gathered overhead for a very noisy get-together. Unfortunately, they'd wandered into a clearing, no trees to protect them from a downpour. But Ivy knew this clearing, its rocks and fallen branches quite familiar. They weren't too far from her den. "If we hurry, I think we can make it home before the rain comes," Ivy said. "You're welcome to a cup of tea and my extra cot." "If it's not too much trouble," Bert replied. "I wouldn't mind resting my legs for the night." So they dashed back to the den, reaching its safety just as it began to sprinkle. Ivy left the roof slightly open to hear the gentle rain above, a few droplets finding their way inside every now and again. She poured them some tea, made up the extra cot, and they talked and talked till the rain sang them to sleep. The pair were up bright and early the following morning, ready to continue their wandering, deciding this time to take a different path. A new sun arose, making the freshly fallen rain sparkle on the grass. They made their way across the muddy ground, climbing over branches the wind had felled. As they wandered on, Ivy thought more about Bert's carefree attitude about his wings. He seemed so confident that he would find them when the time came, and that no amount of searching would get him there any faster. She decided to give his mindset a try and let go of her seeking for the day. "Perhaps if I stop looking so hard, I'll sneak up on a few more special somethings anyway," she thought. Because, as I'm sure you know, special somethings are sometimes a bit shy in revealing themselves. So Ivy and Bert continued their journey, passing the day away with ebbs of chatter and flows of silence. As evening fell, they happened upon a trail worn down by the feet of many deer, raccoons, foxes, and birds. Their tracks weaved in and around and over one another to create a beautiful tapestry in the rain-soaked mud. Through the hollows, Ivy spotted a feather, discarded and forgotten by its owner. How could someone let go of something so beautiful, she thought. She slid her tiny hands over it, admiring the delicate, speckled pattern the strands made together, and tucked it into her backpack. They followed the tracks as the sun began to set. Though the footprints eventually diverged from one another as the long-gone animals went their separate ways, Bert and Ivy continued on, leaving teeny tiny footprints of their own. But as Ivy looked around, she discovered she was, in fact, a little bit lost. With the sun quickly setting, she knew she'd never find her way home in the dark. But she found that she wasn't afraid with Bert by her side. They'd find their way home tomorrow. As the sun said goodbye to the sky, the chill of the autumn night set in. Ivy and Bert made their camp and started a fire. They found their places on the soft, mossy ground and quickly fell asleep. The moon made its way across the sky, chasing the stars and casting its glow across the forest. In the very early hours of the morning, the moon only midway across its nightly path, Ivy awoke to the sound of fluttering. Blinking the dreams from her eyes, she felt the tickle of the air like whispers on her cheeks. The cecropia moths had come out to play. They danced in the light of the campfire in a waltz of wings. As Ivy watched in silent awe of their parade, she couldn't help but feel a little bit of sadness for the moment. This was a special something she simply couldn't put on her shelf. "Someday I'll be up there too," Bert whispered. And Ivy knew in her heart that Bert was right. He would be a most magnificent moth. As the sun rose to say good morning, Ivy gathered up her things and stomped out the last embers of the campfire. "Ready to go?" Bert asked. Ivy glanced around their camp, sad to leave the magical night behind, but excited to continue on their adventure. "Ready," she replied, hoisting her backpack across her shoulders. Once again, they set out across the forest floor. They walked and they talked, and they enjoyed each other's company. In their moments of silence, Bert considered Ivy's search for her special somethings. She was so brave in her seeking, and found such beauty in the things he didn't even give a second glance. You see, Bert had a secret. He knew how to find his wings, but he was afraid of the wings he would find. He hadn't simply been wandering through the forest. He'd been running away from what he knew must take place. As the autumn days ticked away, he'd felt the pull to transform growing stronger and stronger, and that feeling was so very terrifying. Bert longed to be a lovely moth, with big, beautiful patterns like the cecropias, or the softest mint green wings like the lunas. But woollyworm moths were quite plain in Bert's eyes. Small and brown and ordinary. And Bert was afraid of being ordinary too. But as he walked with Ivy, watching her find something special in such ordinary things, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could see his ordinary wings as special too. Midway through the morning, they came across a small pond hidden behind a curtain of cattails. Tall reeds grew along the banks, giving shade from the sun. It was a lovely spot for a break, so they strolled to the edge and dipped their toes in the water. "Turn around for a moment," Bert said with a glimmer in his eye. With every gust of autumn wind, Bert knew his time was coming soon, but he'd grown quite fond of Ivy during their travels, and he was determined to give her a parting gift. "All right." Ivy turned and closed her eyes. Was this the beginnings of a game of hide and seek? She heard a sweet, low whistle. Ivy felt a tap on her shoulder and turned. Bert handed her the tiniest flute made from the tiniest reed. "Oh, Bert," she squealed, "you made this for me? It's just my size." Ivy took a deep breath and blew a soft, wistful tune, carefully pressing her palms against the holes to change the notes. "Wait here," Ivy said. "I have an idea." She waded out among the reeds, carefully scanning the pond for her mark. There she spotted them, the maracas of the forest. She snapped off the smallest lotus pod she could find and ran back to her friend. She handed him the instrument, picked up her flute, and together they played the liveliest traveling music. As they made their way through the forest, they stumbled into a small clearing, the colors of autumn scattered across the ground. In its center, nestled in a particularly cozy pile of leaves, was a fallen branch. Ivy heard Bert let out a small puff of breath beside her. "What is it?" she asked. "I believe this is my branch," he whispered. Ivy tilted her head in question. "Your branch? Do you mean this is your home?" "I mean," Bert said with a tear in his eye, "that this is my goodbye." He climbed up on the branch and gently patted the spot next to him. Ivy settled in beside him, drawing her knees into her chest. This wasn't what she had expected at all. "Goodbye?" she asked. "But we've had so much fun together." Tears tickled her eyes and she hastily blinked them away. "You've made my last days as a caterpillar most magical, Ivy," he said. "But it's time for me to find my wings, and you've given me the courage to finally do so." Ivy let her teardrops fall, feeling the most dreadful mix of emotions. The sweetest joy for her friend to become what he was always meant to be, and the most bitter anguish at having to part from her companion. She stayed with him, watching in quiet awe as he knitted his cocoon. With a tear and a smile and a "Farewell, my friend," Bert slipped into the cocoon and disappeared. "Farewell," Ivy whispered. As she said a silent prayer over him, she laid the gentlest hand on his cocoon and felt the first rhythms of change from within it. It was time to leave her friend to become something new, a journey she could not take with him. As she stood and looked about the clearing, she was struck with a new emotion, dreadful fear. Though being lost with a friend is an exciting adventure, to be lost on your own is ever so frightening. Filled now with grief and worry, she set off to find her way back home. She made her way through a thicket of oak trees, climbed over many molehills, and dashed across a particularly rocky meadow. The journey was long, she was tired, and still she saw nothing familiar to guide her back to her den. Ivy decided to climb a tree, hoping to spot a friendly landmark from the skies. She clambered up the branches and found herself in an old falcon's nest. Inside the nest were many, many somethings. A collection of silver coins, a few strands of colorful ribbons, a bent paperclip, the tiniest pair of glasses, and a scattering of broken eggshells. Gazing at each in turn through the hollows, Ivy noticed the quirky curves and angles of the paperclip, the glimmer of a periwinkle ribbon, and the lovely juxtaposition of tarnish and shine on a silver coin. She tucked the paperclip and the ribbon into her satchel and gently ran her tiny fingers over the face of the coin. Feeling the weight of grief and the fatigue from her journey deep in her bones, she let out a great big yawn. Her body and mind ached for rest, so she curled up in the nest, arms wrapped around the coin, and fell asleep. When Ivy awoke from her nap, she felt rested and ready to find her way back home. She slipped the coin into her backpack with her other special somethings and clambered out of the nest. In her hurry to climb out of the tree, she didn't notice the menacing falcon watching her from the branch above. And the falcon was hungry. With a raging, the falcon launched herself from the tree and dove straight for Ivy. Ivy panicked, her heart pounding in her chest much faster than her feet upon the ground. Desperately, she searched for refuge. "Quick!" a voice cried. "Over here!" Ivy looked this way and that, frantically trying to find the voice. A few paces to her left, a mole bravely popped her head out of a molehill. Ivy risked a glance behind her. The falcon stretched out her talons, mere seconds away from snatching Ivy up for a snack. The hill was Ivy's only chance for escape, so she threw herself to the side, diving into the hole. The mole wrapped Ivy in her fuzzy arms, and down, down, down they fell, safe from the claws of the falcon. With a thud and a puff of dirt, they clumsily spilled out onto the floor. Ivy, winded from her run and dirty from the fall, slowly took in her surroundings. It was a small, round chamber, dark and cozy. "What a lovely little home," Ivy said, brushing the dirt from her trousers. "Thank you ever so much for rescuing me. I was sure to be that falcon's lunch." "You're most welcome, dear," the mole replied. "That falcon is always after us little folk, but you will always find sanctuary in the home of Matilda Mole," she said with a polite little curtsy and a sweep of her paw around the room. "I would fix you up a snack, but I misplaced my glasses last Tuesday during one of my own run-ins with the falcon. I dropped them as I fled, and I haven't been able to bake ever since. Recipes are no good when you can't see the instructions," Matilda murmured, sitting down on a stool and burying her fuzzy face in her paws. "Not to worry, Miss Matilda," Ivy said. "You'll be back to baking in no time. I'm quite good at finding somethings, and I believe I know where your something is." In the back of her mind, Ivy could see a little pair of glasses settled amongst ribbons and coins and twigs and leaves. Miss Matilda's glasses were tucked away in the falcon's nest. Matilda wiped away the tears from her whiskers. "Oh, Ivy, I would be ever so grateful. You can sneak out the back door so the falcon doesn't catch you." She slipped off of her stool and led Ivy to a small tunnel at the back of the chamber, this one much less steep. Though there was no doubt of Ivy's bravery, there could be no doubt of her fear either. Oftentimes, bravery and fear walk hand in hand on adventures. But Ivy was determined to repay her rescuer's kindness, so she embarked on her new challenge, ever on the lookout for the falcon. She retraced her path to the falcon's tree, slipping between rocks and leaves for cover, but the falcon was nowhere to be found. Perhaps she's gone off in search of a different snack, Ivy wondered. Her tiny hands gripped the tree bark as she began her climb back up to the nest. But as she climbed, she heard the most peculiar sound. And the rumble grew louder and louder the higher she climbed. When she finally reached the nest, the sound was deafening. For within the nest were a smattering of somethings, a pair of mole-sized glasses, and a snoring, sleeping falcon. "Oh dear," Ivy whispered. The falcon had one shiny talon wrapped around the glasses. "If I climb into the nest, I'll surely wake the falcon," Ivy thought. "I escaped her once, but what are the chances I'll be able to again?" She quietly paced the rim of the nest, wondering what to do. Perhaps one of my special somethings can help me. Ivy searched through her satchel, sifting through her somethings. The ribbon and the paperclip caught her eye. It was risky, but it was her best shot. Ivy tied the ribbon around the paperclip and carefully lowered it into the nest. With the greatest precision, she looped the paperclip through the glasses and slipped them from the grasp of the falcon. But the falcon began to stir. She was waking up. Ivy couldn't risk climbing back down the tree. It would take far too long, and in her hurry, she would make far too much noise. Frantic with fear of the falcon, she snatched up a leaf from one of the many branches, tucked the glasses and her somethings safely into her satchel, and leapt from the nest. The wind caught the leaf and floated Ivy safely and silently back to the ground. She made her way back to the molehill, sliding down the tunnel a bit more gracefully this time around. Ivy pulled the glasses from her satchel and proudly handed them to Matilda. "Thank you ever so much, Ivy. Now that I can see again, let me fix you a little snack." Matilda gently guided Ivy to a stool to rest and quickly began her baking. She scurried this way and that around the kitchen, throwing dashes of sugar and pinches of spices into a bowl. Ivy gently rested her head on the table and fell into a light doze. Her return to the falcon's nest had left her quite tired. A bit later, she awoke to the tantalizing scent of berries, vanilla, and cinnamon. Matilda had baked a pie. She cut them both a slice, and together they devoured the most delicious snack. Both going back for seconds, of course. They talked as they ate, and Ivy told the mole her tale. Matilda oohed and awed at the magical mothy night, giggled in delight at their homemade instruments, and spilled a few tears at Bert's departure. But as Ivy came to the end of the story, sharing her tragedy of losing her way home, Matilda raised a confident claw. "Now that I can help you with," she said, and scurried to pull something out from underneath her little bed. "I've made a map of the forest for just this reason. I was always losing my way home, confusing my little molehill with my neighbors. Even with my glasses, I'm a bit clumsy with directions," she giggled. "But with my map, now I can always find my way back." Matilda snatched up a blank piece of paper and quickly made a duplicate for Ivy. As Matilda pointed out their spot on the map, Ivy realized just how far she was from home. She and Bert had traveled across the entire forest. But Matilda knew the forest well from her many missed travels and quickly plotted out the smoothest path. If you follow this stream, Matilda pointed to a winding line on the page, you'll make it home in no time. Oh, thank you, Ivy said, wrapping Matilda in the biggest hug. So Ivy left the molehill, her backpack filled with her new special somethings, and a few snacks from Matilda. With the help of the map, she found the stream. She could follow alongside it on foot, but the journey would take her another day at least. If I can travel on the stream, Ivy said to herself, I can likely make it home by this evening. She looked around and around for something to sail on. This branch wasn't big enough, that leaf would simply sink, this piece of old paper would fall apart. So Ivy sat on the ground and brooded. What could she do for a boat? As she sat staring grumpily at the water, she heard a soft tinkling sound, melodic and sweet. She hopped to her feet and searched for the sound. It wasn't coming from the stream, and it wasn't coming from the grass. She looked behind a large boulder and under an even bigger branch. But as she continued her search, the source of the sound eluded her. Wherever is it coming from? She thought with frustration. And then she looked up. There, caught in the branch above her, was a wind chime, its cords tangled among the leaves and its wooden chimes clinking in the breeze. If I tie these chimes together with the cords, Ivy thought, I can build myself a raft. So she scampered up the tree, swiftly untangling the musical makings of her boat. The wind chime dropped to the ground, and Ivy clambered down after it. She weaved this cord under that chime and fastened this cord to that one. In a matter of minutes, Ivy had built herself a raft. She snatched up a twig for an oar, tossed her backpack on the vessel, and set sail, feeling like the cleverest captain who ever sailed a stream. The current swiftly pulled Ivy along with the many fish and tadpoles swimming below. She spread out her map on the raft, making note of each landmark as she passed them. There was the willow tree. There was the boulder shaped like an anteater's nose. There was the grove of maple trees dressed in their most brilliant reds, oranges, and golds. She crossed off each mark on the map as she came closer and closer to her destination. Ivy would be at home tucked safely and snugly in bed in no time. So she stretched out on the raft, happy to rest till she arrived. Slowly but steadily, the water quickened its pace around her, carrying her vessel along faster and faster. She heard a gentle rushing in the distance. Had the wind picked up? Ivy got to her knees and looked around, searching for the noise growing louder and louder, closer and closer. She searched her map, hoping for an explanation. But the one thing missing from it was the enormous waterfall at the end of the stream, quickly pulling her in. Looking up from the map, Ivy saw it. The telltale misty spray of the waterfall. Panicked, she grabbed her oar and paddled desperately toward the shore. But the current was far too strong. The waves kicked up around her, pulling the raft ever closer to the edge. She clutched her satchel with all of its special somethings and braced herself. She was going over the falls, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Down, 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 Ivy fell for what felt like hours. The wind screamed through her ears and swiped the bird skull off of her head. No, she shouted, desperately grasping for it as she fell. But down it went, and down she went into the pool below. Ivy burst up through the water. She searched, and she searched, and she searched, but it was nowhere to be found. Ivy's bird skull was gone. As Ivy swam to the shore, her tears mixed with the pool. The skull had been with her through so many adventures, and now she would never see it again. Defeated, she sat on the shoreline, carefully emptying her backpack beside her to let the soaked objects dry. She gazed across them, no skull to peer through, and found simply somethings. The feather was just a feather, the flute no more than a reed with holes, the ribbon, the paperclip, the silver coin, all were as ordinary as any something could be. A deep fear filled Ivy's heart. She quickly scooped the items into her arms and raced up the hill, now more anxious than ever to be home. She fled to her den and flew down the ladder, breathless with worry and exhaustion. As she looked up at her special shelves and down at the items in her arms, her fears were confirmed. All the somethings she'd gathered were not special at all. The particular pine cone was the same shade of brown it had always been. The arrowhead was as dull as it ever was. Even the chipped button was the same drab shade of blue. Ivy believed then, deep down in her heart, that without her bird skull, her somethings were simply somethings, and nothing more. The tears fell, and the minutes did too, long and many. For hours she cried till the moon peeked its head over the horizon. But then, in the first hours of the night, she heard a on her roof and the soft flutter of wings. Ivy gently wiped the tears from her cheeks and made her way back up the ladder. She slid open the roof, and her heart filled with joy. She knew him before he ever said a word. He truly was the most magnificent moth. There, wings illuminated by the magical light of the moon, was Bert. Together they sat and shared their stories, Bert's of beautiful change and Ivy's of heart-wrenching loss. They laughed and they cried, sharing their joys and their sorrows. "Oh, Bert," Ivy said, "without my bird skull, my somethings aren't special at all. Such a journey and all for nothing." "Whatever do you mean?" he asked. "You've collected so many special somethings." Ivy wiped away a tear. "No, they aren't. The bird skull made them magical, made them brighter and more beautiful. All I have is a bunch of ordinary things. There's nothing special about them at all." "Of course there is," said Bert. "Every wonderful item you've collected is a special something because you saw something special in them. From a chipped blue button to the most ordinary woolly worm." Bert gently touched his wing to her shoulder. "You showed me that the ordinary can be special, the mundane can be magical, and the plain can be spectacular when you simply open your eyes to see it. And it was your eyes that saw all those things, Ivy. That little bird skull simply gave you the permission you never truly needed to see things the way you always saw them. The way you view the world is your specialist something." And deep in her heart, she knew Bert was right. So with the help of her friend, she carefully arranged each special something on the shelves, seeing the beauty in every chip and crack and tarnish and tear. As she stood back to admire her collection, she knew with full assurance that each of her somethings truly was special. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoyed going on this adventure with Ivy and me. If you'd like to pick up a copy of the book for yourself or a loved one, there's a link down in the description to snag a copy for your bookshelf. This really has been such a wonderful journey, and I'm so excited to be able to share Ivy's story with you. Huge thank you to the Cozy and Curious Creatives over on Patreon for helping to support my creative practice and for being the OG readers of Ivy's story. If you missed out on some of the behind the scenes process of creating this book, then head on over to this playlist to join the journey. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.